There was a time long ago when the gods walked among mortals. An era when destiny was woven from threads of gold and crimson. A time when love and tragedy were two sides of the same coin, forged in the fiery depths of the Olympian workshops. And among all the immortals, who ruled the world from the snow-capped peaks of the sacred mountain, none shone as brightly as he who was called Phoebus, the radiant one, striking from afar, the god of truth, music, and prophecy. He was Apollo, and his story is one of a light that illuminates and consumes, a force that protects and destroys, a love that elevates and dooms. But before Apollo first opened his eyes, before his first cry echoed across the known world, there was pain, there was persecution, there was a mother, wandering the earth in search of a place to give birth to the children she carried within her womb. Leto was her name, daughter of the titans Zeus and Phoebe. She belonged to an ancient lineage that ruled the cosmos before Zeus and his brethren overthrew Cronus. Her beauty was serene, like moonlight reflected in tranquil waters. And it was this very beauty that caught the eye of the king of the gods. Zeus saw her, Zeus desired her, and Zeus, as was his wont, took what he wanted without measuring the consequences. Leto became pregnant with divine twins. And then the nightmare began. Hera, the lawful spouse of Zeus, learned of the infidelity. Her fury was boundless. She could not punish her husband, for he was the lord of Olympus, and no power equaled his. But she could destroy his lover. She could turn her existence into an endless hell. And that is precisely what she did. Hera issued an edict that echoed across every corner of creation. No solid ground, no continent, no island anchored to the seabed could offer refuge to Leto. Any place that welcomed her would face the wrath of the queen of the gods. Earthquakes would shake its foundations. Plague would decimate its inhabitants. Misfortune would rain down upon them like poison droplets. Terror spread throughout the world. Leto walked on. She walked through days that turned into weeks, weeks that morphed into months. Her belly grew, and the pains began to manifest. Each time she found a place to rest, each time she pleaded for shelter, doors slammed shut in her face. Kings banished her from their realms. Villages rejected her with stones and curses. No one wanted to incur the wrath of Hera. But the cruelty of the queen of Olympus did not stop there. Hera sent Python, a monstrous creature born from the very earth, to pursue Leto. The beast was immense. Its scales shimmered with a greenish glow under the sunlight. Its breath was poison. Its eyes burned with ancient and malevolent intelligence. And its sole mission was to find the pregnant Titaness and destroy her before she could give birth. Leto fled. Python followed. The Titaness traversed mountains and valleys, forded mighty rivers and scorching deserts. Her feet bled. Her body trembled with exhaustion. But she could not stop. She could not surrender. For within her beat two hearts besides her own. Two lives that depended on her endurance. And then she found Delos. It was a tiny island, barely a patch of barren rock, adrift in the Aegean Sea. It was not anchored to the seabed. It wandered aimlessly, driven by the currents, ignored by gods and mortals alike. It was so insignificant that even Hera had not thought to include it in her decree. Leto fell to her knees on this desolate rock. She pleaded, and Delos, the wandering island, an island with nothing to lose, accepted her. But Leto's suffering was not over. Hera had one last plan. She detained Eileithyia, the goddess of childbirth, on Olympus, preventing her from descending to assist the Titaness. Without Eileithyia, no divine child could be born. Leto writhed in agony on the rocks of Delos. Her cries pierced the heavens. For 9 days her torment lasted. 9 endless nights during which the world held its breath. Finally, the other gods intervened. Iris, the messenger with rainbow wings, was sent to Olympus with a necklace of gold and amber, 9 cubits long, as a bribe for Hera. The queen of the gods accepted the gift and allowed Eileithyia to descend. The moment the goddess of childbirth touched the soil of Delos, Leto grasped the only tree growing on the island, a solitary palm, and beneath its shade, she gave birth. First came Artemis. The girl emerged without a single cry. Her eyes were silver like the moon, her hair dark as a starless night, and barely touching the ground, she stood on her feet. For Artemis was no ordinary child. She was a goddess, and gods know nothing of mortal childhood. Artemis knelt beside her mother and assisted with the second birth. And then Apollo was born. The world shifted in that instant. Golden light erupted from the newborn's body. Swans, circling above Delos, flew 7 times around the island, chanting, "The sea has calmed, the sky has cleared, and the wandering island has ceased its wanderings forever," anchored to the seabed as a sign that something sacred has transpired here. Themis, the Titaness of divine law and order, approached the child and offered him nectar and ambrosia, the food of the immortals. Apollo tasted it, and in that moment, the swaddling clothes that bound his body tore asunder. The infant grew. In a matter of seconds, he transformed into a youth of impossible beauty. His skin shone like polished gold. His hair cascaded in golden curls over his shoulders. His eyes held the light of 1,000 suns. Apollo stood and spoke. His first words were a declaration of purpose. He proclaimed that the lyre and the bow would be his instruments, that he would reveal to mortals the infallible will of his father, Zeus, that he would establish an oracle where people could learn their fate. The gods who witnessed his birth exchanged astonished glances. No newborn had ever spoken with such clarity. None had ever displayed such determination. But what would follow would prove that Apollo was no ordinary god. Hephaestus, the divine smith, forged him a silver bow and a quiver full of arrows that never missed their mark. Zeus sent him a chariot drawn by swans so he could travel the world. And barely 4 days after his birth, Apollo set out on a quest for vengeance. Python was still alive, the creature that had haunted his mother for months, that had tried to destroy her before he was born, still lurked on the slopes of Mount Parnassus, and Apollo had no intention of forgiving. The young god descended upon Delphi like a beam of pure light. Python awaited him. The monster rose to its full height, bearing fangs dripping with venom. For generations, it had been invincible. It had devoured heroes, it had decimated armies. No one had even been able to wound it. Apollo drew his bow. The first arrow cleaved the air with a deadly hiss, found its mark in Python's flank. The creature roared in pain, but did not fall. It lunged at the god with gaping jaws. Apollo fired again and again and again. 100 silver arrows plunged into the monster's body, 100 wounds from which oozed dark ichor. Python writhed, groaned, but continued to advance. His hatred was stronger than pain. Finally, Apollo released the last arrow. It found the creature's heart. Python fell. Its body crashed upon the rocks of Delphi, and from its spilled blood, vapors rose from the fissures in the earth. Apollo contemplated the corpse of his enemy, and then made a decision that would alter the course of history. Here, on the spot where Python had perished, he would establish his oracle. But the gods do not act without consequences. Python, though monstrous, was a child of Gaia, the earth herself. Its death was sacrilege that demanded atonement. Zeus ordered Apollo to purify himself and to institute funeral games in honor of the creature he had slain. Thus were born the Pythian Games, held every 4 years in Delphi. Apollo obeyed. He purified himself in the Vale of Tempe. And when he returned to Delphi, he was no longer just the god of light and music. He was also the god of prophecy. The construction of the temple began. Apollo needed priests to serve in his sanctuary, people to interpret the signs he would manifest. And he found them in the most unexpected way. One day, gazing at the sea from the heights of Parnassus, he saw a Cretan ship sailing by. The sailors were headed for Pylos, unaware that their lives were about to change forever. Apollo transformed himself into a dolphin of monstrous size and leaped onto the deck of the vessel. The sailors froze in terror. The dolphin did not attack them. Instead, it took control of the ship, diverting it from its original course. The winds obeyed his will. The currents dragged them towards the Gulf of Idea. And when they finally reached the shore near Delphi, the dolphin vanished. In its place stood Apollo, radiant as the midday sun. The Cretans fell to their knees. the god revealed to them his identity and his purpose. He commanded them to become the guardians of his temple, the priests who would serve his oracle for generations to come. And because he had appeared to them in the form of a dolphin, he bade them to invoke him as Apollo Delphinios. From this would derive the name Delphi. The Pythia was established as the voice of the oracle, a virgin priestess, seated on a bronze tripod, inhaling the vapors rising from the earth where Python had perished. In a trance, she uttered the words of the god. Words enigmatic, ambiguous, requiring interpretation, but always true, always infallible. Kings and paupers traveled from the ends of the known world to consult the oracle at Delphi. Wars began and ended according to its pronouncements. Cities were founded following its precepts. The fate of Hellas was woven in that temple on the slopes of Parnassus. Apollo had fulfilled his promise. He had established his oracle. He had avenged his mother. He had proven himself worthy to take his place among the 12 Olympians. But power and glory do not protect from suffering. And Apollo was about to discover that his greatest gift was also his greatest curse. It all began with a mockery. The god of light had just slain Python. His silver bow had proven to be the most deadly weapon in the universe. And in his pride, he made a mistake that he would pay for throughout eternity. He saw Eros, the god of love, practicing with his tiny bow. The arrows of Aphrodite's son were small, almost laughable, compared to Apollo's. And the god of light could not resist the temptation to mock him. He questioned what the effeminate boy intended to do with weapons fit for warriors. He told him to be content with kindling the flames of desire and not to presume to compare his victories with his own. Eros smiled. It was a smile that should have warned Apollo of the danger. But the god of light was too intoxicated by his own glory to notice it. Eros took 2 arrows from his quiver. One was golden with a diamond tip. It caused instantaneous and unquenchable love in whoever it struck. The other was leaden with a dull tip. It engendered absolute rejection, a revulsion that no argument or action could overcome. The golden arrow pierced Apollo's heart. The leaden arrow found its mark in the breast of Daphne. Daphne was a nymph of the forests, daughter of the river god Peneus. She had dedicated her life to Artemis, Apollo's twin sister. She had vowed to remain a virgin, rejecting marriage and the love of mortals and gods alike. Her beauty was wild, untamed, like the forests where she hunted. Apollo saw her, and everything he was, everything he had been before, ceased to matter. There was only her, only the desire to possess her. The god approached, spoke to her with sweet words, promised her riches, power, immortality. He told her that he was the son of Zeus, that his bow never missed, that his lyre made the stars weep. He offered her everything he had. Daphne fled. There was no polite refusal or elaborate explanation. She simply ran. She ran as if her life depended on it because for her, at that moment, it did. The leaden arrow had done its work. The very thought of Apollo made her nauseous. His presence was unbearable to her. But Apollo was a god, and gods do not accept rejection. He pursued her through forests and meadows, through mountains and valleys, along the banks of rivers and the shores of the sea. He pursued her with the persistence of one who had lost all capacity for reason. The love he felt was not true love. It was an obsession, it was madness. It was the poison of Eros' arrow coursing through his divine veins. Daphne ran faster than any mortal could. But Apollo was even faster. The distance between them narrowed. The god's breath burned the back of the nymph's neck. His fingers brushed against her loose hair. And then, Daphne cried out. She called upon her father, begged him to save her, to destroy the form that had so pleased the god, to transform her into anything but a woman that Apollo could possess. Peneus heard her. Daphne's feet sank into the earth. Her toes melded into a rough trunk. Her arms reached towards the sky, dividing into branches. Her hair became leaves. Her skin became bark. Apollo arrived a moment too late. Where there had been a woman, there was now a laurel tree. The god embraced the trunk, felt Daphne's heart still beating beneath the bark, slower and slower, until it stopped altogether. Tears streamed down his divine cheeks, and he understood, perhaps for the first time, that there were forces in the universe that even he could not control. But even in his pain, Apollo could not let her go. He declared that the laurel would be his sacred tree, that its leaves would crown the heads of poets and victorious warriors, that it would remain forever green, as was his love for her. He used his powers of eternal youth to ensure that the laurel would never wither. Thus, what he could not possess in life he claimed in death. This alone would have been punishment enough for any mortal. But Apollo was immortal, and his sentence was to continue to love, to continue to lose again and again. If this story has captured your attention, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Here, every tale is a journey through the myths that shaped civilizations. And what follows in the story of Apollo will break your heart in ways you never imagined. Time passed. Mortals were born and died. Empires rose and fell. But for the gods, time flowed differently. A century could feel like a breath, or a day could stretch, it seemed, into eternity. For Apollo, each Daphne-less day was an eternity of pain. But the gods cannot remain alone forever. And eventually, Apollo's heart stirred again. Her name was Caronis. She was a princess of Thessaly, daughter of Phlegyas. Her beauty rivaled that of the goddesses themselves. And when Apollo saw her bathing in the waters of a lake, the memory of Daphne faded like mist under the midday sun. This time it was different. Caronis responded to his affections. She gave herself to the god on the shores of Lake Bibias, and from that union, she became pregnant. Apollo had to return to Delphi. The duties of the oracle could not wait. But before leaving, he left a white raven to watch over his beloved and to report any news to him. It was a fatal mistake. Caronis did not know that she carried the son of a god in her womb. And in Apollo's absence, her father betrothed her to a prince named Ischys. The young woman, feeling abandoned by the god who had seduced her, agreed. The white raven flew to Delphi. The news he brought ignited Apollo's rage. The god of light, the god of truth, the god who never missed, was blinded by jealousy. He cursed the raven, forever staining its feathers black as punishment for bringing such terrible tidings. And then he sought vengeance. Some tales say that Apollo himself drew his bow. Others claim that it was his sister Artemis, ever ready to punish those who betrayed her twin's trust. The result was the same. An arrow pierced Caronis' breast. The princess fell. Her blood stained the stones of the courtyard where she had played with her friends. And as life ebbed from her body, Apollo watched her die, remorse coming too late. Too late he realized that his jealousy had led him to destroy that which he loved most. He tried to heal her. He, who was the god of medicine, who had taught mortals the art of healing. But the arrow had been loosed by divine hands, and the wounds of the gods cannot be healed by herbs or salves. Caronis died, but before her body was consumed by the flames of the funeral pyre, Apollo did something that no other god had ever attempted. He cut open the womb of his dead lover and extracted the child growing inside. The child was alive. Apollo named him Asclepius. The god could not raise his son. His duties on Olympus and in Delphi did not allow it. So he entrusted the child to the centaur Chiron, the wisest of his kind, a teacher of heroes and healers. Chiron taught Asclepius everything he knew about the art of healing, showed him the properties of every medicinal plant, revealed to him the secrets of the human body. And the youth learned with an ease that amazed even his immortal mentor. And Asclepius became the greatest physician the world had ever known. He cured diseases that others deemed incurable. He healed wounds that would have killed any man. His fame spread throughout Hellas. The sick traveled from distant lands just to receive his aid. But Asclepius was not content with mere healing. He wanted to conquer death itself. Athena gave him 2 vials of Gorgon blood. The blood from the left side was a deadly poison, but the blood from the right side possessed the power to restore life to the dead. And Asclepius began to use it. And Politus, the son of Theseus, was torn apart by his own horses when they were startled. Asclepius gathered his remains and breathed life back into him. Others followed. The dead returned from the realm of Hades. Families were reunited with their loved ones. This angered the gods. Hades appealed to Zeus. The lord of the underworld watched his realm emptying. The natural order was being disrupted. If mortals could escape death, the entire structure of the cosmos would collapse. Zeus listened and acted. A thunderbolt hurtled from the heights of Olympus. It found Asclepius as he tended to a patient. Apollo's son died instantly, struck down by the most powerful weapon in the universe. Apollo's grief was immeasurable. First Daphne, then Caronus, now Asclepius. Every time his heart dared to love, tragedy followed. Every time he found a flicker of light in his existence, shadows consumed it. But this time, grief turned to rage. Apollo could not attack Zeus. No god could withstand the king of Olympus and survive. But there were others who could pay. The Cyclopes. These one-eyed giants had forged the thunderbolt that had killed his son. They worked in the forges of Hephaestus, crafting the weapons of the gods. And Apollo decided that they must die. He found them in their subterranean workshop, shot them down one by one. Their immense bodies crashed amidst the flames of the forges they had fueled for eons. Zeus could not ignore such an insult. The murder of the Cyclopes was a crime deserving of Tartarus, the deepest abyss of the underworld, where the Titans suffered eternal punishment. But Leto, Apollo's mother, interceded on his behalf. She pleaded with Zeus to forgive her son, reminded him of the services Apollo had rendered to Olympus. She begged for mercy. Zeus relented in part. Instead of Tartarus, Apollo was condemned to serve as a slave to a mortal for 1 year. He was stripped of his divinity, reduced to the status of a simple shepherd, and sent to Thessaly, where he had to tend the flocks of King Admetus. Admetus was a just man, though he did not know that his new shepherd was actually a god in disguise. He treated him with kindness and respect, gave him food and shelter, protected him from the bandits that ravaged the region. Apollo, touched by the mortal's goodness, decided to reward him. When his year of servitude ended, he revealed his true identity and offered him a gift. He helped Admetus win Alcestis, the daughter of King Peleus, by performing an impossible feat that the girl's father had demanded as a condition for the marriage. And when the time of Admetus' death came, Apollo persuaded the Moirai, the spinners of fate, to allow the king to live longer if someone would take his place. No one was willing to do so, not his elderly parents, nor his most faithful servants. Only Alcestis, his wife, was willing to die in his stead. But that is another story. Apollo had served his punishment. He had lived as a mortal. He had experienced the fragility of human existence. And when he returned to Olympus, something had changed within him. The arrogance that had led him to mock Eros had vanished. In its place was a deep melancholy, a profound knowledge of suffering that few immortals could comprehend. But fate had not yet finished with him. Hyacinthus entered his life like a ray of light after an endless night. He was the youngest son of King Amyclas of Sparta. His beauty surpassed that of any mortal Apollo had ever seen. His eyes sparkled with a joy whose existence the god had forgotten. His laughter was like music, sweeter than any melody he could coax from his lyre. Apollo loved him not with the painful obsession he had felt for Daphne, not with the possessive passion that had bound him to Caronus. He loved him with tenderness, with patience, with a sincere desire to see this extraordinary youth flourish. He put aside his duties in Delphi, temporarily abandoned his son chariot, spent his days in Sparta by Hyacinthus' side, taught him to play the lyre, showed him the secrets of the bow, instructed him in the exercises of the palestra. And Hyacinthus loved him in return. They were inseparable, hunted together on the slopes of Taygetus, swam in the crystalline waters of the Eurotas, anointed themselves with olive oil, and competed in the athletic disciplines so prized by the Spartans. For the first time in eons, Apollo knew happiness, but he was not alone in his love. Zephyrus, the god of the west wind, had also set his sights on Hyacinthus. He watched from the heights as the young prince devoted all his attention to the god of light. Jealousy consumed him, envy poisoned him, and he waited for the perfect moment for his revenge. came on a summer afternoon. The sun was at its zenith. Apollo and Hyacinthus decided to compete in throwing the discus. They anointed their bodies with oil, as was the custom. Their muscles gleamed under the golden light. Apollo threw first. The discus flew with a force that only a god could impart. It cleaved the air, disappearing among the clouds, before beginning its descent. Hyacinthus ran to catch it. He wanted to prove himself, too. He wanted to impress the god he loved. His feet pounded the earth as his eyes followed the trajectory of the discus. And then Zephyrus acted. He blew. A sudden gust of wind, furious, unnatural. The discus abruptly changed direction. Instead of falling where Hyacinthus expected, it swerved towards him. The impact was devastating. The metal edge struck the young prince in the temple with all the force that Apollo had invested in his throw. The discus throw. Hyacinthus collapsed. Apollo rushed to him, cradling him in his arms as blood gushed from the wound, desperately trying to heal him. He who was the god of medicine who had healed countless mortals. But the wound was too severe. Hyacinthus's fate was sealed. The youth opened his eyes one last time. He looked at Apollo with an expression the god would never forget. There was no reproach in that gaze, no fear, only love. A love so pure, so absolute. It shattered Apollo's immortal heart into a million pieces. Hyacinthus died in his arms. A cry, wrenched from Apollo's throat, made the earth tremble. The Spartans, who witnessed the scene, fell to their knees in terror at the magnitude of the divine grief. The very gods of Olympus felt that lament resonate through their immortal halls. Apollo would not allow Hades to claim the soul of his beloved. From Hyacinthus's blood, he created a flower with purple petals, marked with symbols resembling the Greek letters Ai, Ai. The sound of morning. The hyacinth would bloom every spring, a perennial reminder of this truncated love. Zephyr was punished. According to some accounts, Apollo transformed him into the wind forever, condemning him to wander the world, unable to touch or be touched. By others, he was forced to serve Eros, the god of love, as penance for destroying something so pure. The Spartans instituted the Hyacinthia, an annual festival lasting 3 days. The first was dedicated to mourning the prince's death, a somber reflection on loss and mortality. The other 2 celebrated his rebirth in the form of a flower, a testament to enduring beauty and resilience. But for Apollo, there was no celebration. Only emptiness remained, a hollow echo in the chambers of his heart. The list of tragedies continued to grow. Cassandra was the daughter of Priam and Hecuba, the king and queen of Troy. Her beauty caught Apollo's attention, and he offered her the gift of prophecy in exchange for her love. Cassandra accepted the gift, but when it came time to fulfill her part of the bargain, she rejected the god. Apollo could not take back what he had already given. The gifts of the gods are irreversible, but he could add a curse to his gift. Cassandra would retain her gift of seeing the future, but no one would ever believe her prophecies. She foresaw the fall of Troy, warned her fellow citizens of the danger of the wooden horse, screamed, pleaded, tore at her clothes, trying to make them understand. All considered her mad, all ignored her warnings. Troy fell. Cassandra was raped by Ajax the Lesser in the Temple of Athena, a violation that echoed through the ages. Taken as war booty by Agamemnon, she predicted the death of the Greek king and her own. No one believed her. She perished, murdered by Clytemnestra, fulfilling the prophecy she herself had uttered. And Apollo watched from Olympus, knowing that his curse had destroyed yet another life, a bitter taste in his divine mouth. Niobe made the mistake of comparing herself to Leto. She was the queen of Thebes, wife of Amphion. She had 14 children, 7 sons and 7 daughters. And in her pride, she publicly declared herself superior to the mother of Apollo and Artemis, for she had borne 14 offspring, while Leto had only 2. Leto heard, her children heard. Apollo and Artemis descended upon Thebes with their bows drawn. The god of light slaughtered the 7 sons as they engaged in athletics outside the city. One by one they fell, pierced by silver arrows. Some tried to run, Others begged for mercy. None were spared. Artemis did the same to the 7 daughters. Niobe was left alone, her 14 children lying dead around her. Grief consumed her. She fled to Mount Sipylus, where the gods transformed her into stone. But even as a rock, she continued to weep. Her tears became a spring that flowed eternally down the mountainside, a monument to unending sorrow. Marsyas challenged Apollo to a musical contest. He was a satyr who had found the double flute, which Athena had invented and then discarded. He learned to play it with such skill that his fame spread throughout Hellas. Believing that he could surpass even the god of music, he challenged him to a contest. The Muses were the judges. Both played magnificently. The result seemed a draw. But then Apollo proposed an additional condition. Each contestant had to play their instrument upside down. The lyre could be played upside down without any problem. The double flute could not. Marsyas lost. The punishment for his audacity was terrible. Apollo tied him to a tree and flayed him alive. The satyr's blood formed a river that bore his name. His screams of agony echoed through the forests for many days. Some say that Apollo repented afterward, that he turned his lyre into a constellation as penance for his excessive cruelty. But repentance did not restore Marsyas' skin. The Trojan War arrived. Apollo sided with the Trojans not because he particularly loved them, but because the Greeks had committed unforgivable offenses. Agamemnon seized Chrysis, the daughter of Chryses, a priest of Apollo. When the old man arrived at the Greek camp to plead for his daughter's release, offering a generous ransom, Agamemnon publicly humiliated him. Apollo unleashed a plague. His invisible arrows struck the Achaean camp for 9 days. Warriors fell by the hundreds. Bodies piled up. Funeral pyres burned without rest. Only when Agamemnon agreed to return Chrysis did the plague cease. But Apollo's participation in the war did not end there. He defended the Trojan heroes, rescued Aeneas when Diomedes was about to kill him, cloaking him in a cloud and carrying him from the battlefield, guiding Hector in moments of his greatest glory, helping him break through the Greek defenses. And when it came to Achilles, Apollo was there. The son of Thetis had killed Troilus, Apollo's son by Queen Hecuba. Defiling the god's own temple, he destroyed Hector, Troy's beloved prince, and dragged his corpse around the walls of the city. Paris, the prince who started the whole war by abducting Helen, drew his bow. He was a mediocre archer, lacking the skill and strength of the great warriors. His arrow would never have found Achilles' only vulnerable spot. But Apollo guided that arrow. The projectile flew with supernatural precision, found the hero's heel, the only place where he could be wounded. Achilles fell, the greatest warrior of his generation, killed by an arrow fired by a coward and guided by a god. The Greeks eventually won the war. Troy fell in flames, but Apollo had his revenge. Centuries passed. The cult of Apollo spread throughout the known world. The Romans adopted him without changing his name, an honor bestowed upon no other Greek god. His temple at Delphi became the spiritual center of the ancient world. Emperors consulted his oracle before making crucial decisions. Generals sought his blessing before going to war. Poets invoked his name before beginning their creations. But Apollo was no longer the arrogant god who mocked Eros. No longer the obsessed hunter who chased Daphne through the woods. No longer the jealous lover who ordered Caronus killed. Eternity had transformed him. Each tragedy left its mark. Each loss deepened his wisdom. The god of light learned that even the brightest shine casts shadows, that the greatest power cannot control the human heart, that knowing the future does not mean being able to change it. Greek philosophers saw in Apollo the principle of order, reason, harmony. They contrasted him with Dionysus, the god of ecstasy and chaos. They said that civilization needs both, the Apollonian light that orders, and the Dionysian fire that creates. But perhaps they only understood part of the truth. Apollo was not only light, he was also darkness. He was not only order, he was also destruction. He was not only healing, he was also disease. He was the god who healed and who sent plagues, who revealed the truth and who punished those who rejected it, who loved with tenderness and who destroyed with fury. He was ultimately the most human of the gods because humans too contain multitudes. They too love and destroy, create and devastate, illuminate and darken. The difference is that humans die and in death find an end to their contradictions. Apollo lived forever. His contradictions were eternal. His suffering had no end. Every spring, when the hyacinths bloomed in the fields of Hellas, the god remembered the young prince he had loved and lost. Every time he saw a laurel tree, he thought of Daphne and the chase that condemned her to exist as a tree. Every time he heard a prophet proclaiming truths that no one believed, he remembered Cassandra and the curse he himself had uttered. The oracle at Delphi fell silent. The temple became ruins. The priests disappeared. The Pythia ceased to utter her prophecies. The world changed, and the ancient gods were forgotten by those who had worshipped at their altars for millennia. But Apollo did not disappear, because gods do not die when people stop believing in them. They merely slumber, waiting, watching from the shadows of the collective memory. And at every dawn, when the sun crosses the horizon and bathes the world in its golden light, there are those who swear that they can feel his presence. The god who illuminated civilizations, the archer who never missed, except when his heart chose the target. The prophet who knew all fates, except his own. The Greeks understood what the modern world has forgotten. That perfection does not guarantee happiness, that power does not protect from suffering, that the strongest love can become the cruelest curse. Apollo was perfect, and his perfection was his sentence, because only the imperfect can know the peace of mediocrity, only the weak can take refuge in the ignorance of their limitations. Only mortals can find solace in the oblivion of death. Apollo had none of these refuges. His beauty was eternal and eternally reminded him of what he had lost. His knowledge was infinite and infinitely showed him what he could not change. His power was absolute and absolutely useless to heal the wounds of his heart. Apollo's legacy was not only the oracle at Delphi and the temples that rose in his honor throughout the Mediterranean. Not only the music he inspired and the prophecies he revealed, not only the medicine he taught through his son Asclepius and the victories he crowned with laurel. His true legacy was the truth that the Greeks carved into the stones at the entrance to their most sacred temple. Know thyself, nothing in excess. Words that Apollo himself learned through pain. Truths that he discovered at the cost of everything he loved. So, at every dawn, when the sun crosses the horizon, the Greeks remembered Apollo, not the perfect god of statues, but the god who loved and lost, who taught mortals that the brightest light casts the darkest shadows, that the greatest gift can become the cruelest curse, and that even those who dwell on Olympus know the bitter taste of tears. His legacy was not only music and prophecy. It was the most ancient truth of all. To love is to risk losing. If the story touched your heart, leave a comment. My light casts shadows too.